The 2026 NFL Combine is upon us, and our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com just touched down and straight to the Broncos podcast studio to talk about it. Welcome to another episode of Altitude Advantage. I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. As I just mentioned, our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, is here, fresh from the Combine. I know you didn't run it or anything, but there was some action here as we're trying to get in the right mindset for the Combine.
Yeah, I'm back from Indianapolis, another great Combine. I mean, it's obviously still going on with all the guys. The workouts are just getting going, but heard from head coach Sean Payton, heard from general manager George Payton, and a lot of news from Indianapolis. So I'm excited to break it all down and get talking about it. But, this to me, in terms of like newsworthiness of a Combine press conference is up there. We've had the last couple years, obviously, every offseason there's storylines, but, not to give a spoiler or anything, but in terms of the Davis Webb play calling news, that's a big story, and excited to break it all down here.
Yeah, some big takeaways that we got from the NFL Combine. I think that's one of the things that people forget. Before all the drills and before these guys that have worked so hard in college get there and showcase for the scouts and the coaches, there's a lot of things that happen before that. A lot of coaches come in, they all talk about things that they need to improve on, want to improve on, big news. Obviously, like a lot of head coaching changes happen this offseason as we continue to go through it. But what were your biggest takeaways from the Combine? As you mentioned, you heard from general manager George Payton and head coach Sean Payton.
Yeah, I think the biggest one is the news that Davis Webb will call plays for this Broncos offense. Sean Payton has called plays every season that he's been a head coach in this league, one of the best play callers of the last several decades, and in my opinion, a Hall of Fame type coach, in part because of his play calling ability. And so this is a change, and it's interesting because it comes right after the Broncos make it to the AFC Championship game. And this was a team that it's not like they didn't have success offensively last year, right? They finished in the top 10 in terms of offense, and you saw in that Buffalo game the ability for Bo Nix and that offense to get going. But what it says to me maybe is that Sean Payton sees an opportunity for improvement. And I think it's easy for coaches or teams to kind of get to the AFC Championship game, right, or get themselves in playoff contention and say, we're just going to run it back. And we'll get to this in a second. But this team is not approaching it like that. There's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of, hey, we've got to be better. And Sean Payton mentioned several areas where the team has to be better. And so he's taken a look at things. And obviously you have some staffing changes. It sounds like we'll get a finalized coaching staff kind of in the coming days based on what Sean Payton said on Tuesday. But one of those changes is going to be that Davis Webb is going to be the primary play caller. Sean Payton still said he'll call some plays on game day. He's still going to be involved with the offense, which I think is what you want. This is a guy who, I think back to that Chiefs game where Sean Payton says that, hey, he's never in the barn when it comes to offensive game planning, getting ready for a game. They put in a play the day before that Chiefs game in Week 11. It ends up being the game-winning throw to Cortland Sutton. And so that's the sort of thing where it's like you want Sean Payton's input there. You want his experience, and you want him there to help Davis Webb as he calls plays for the first time. We saw him do it in one preseason game last year. The Broncos had over 500 yards of total offense. They scored 24 first-half points. So it was a very successful outing, but it's definitely going to be a different beast when you do it in the regular season and you do it consistently. I do think one thing that's clear here is there were two takeaways in terms of why this happened. Number one is because of Davis and because of the potential that Sean Payton sees in Davis Webb. He said he has a gift. He thinks he can call plays at a really high level. And it wasn't like Sean Payton was looking around and saying, I'm going to give play calling to anybody. I want to give up play calling. It was specifically with Davis Webb in mind. This dates back all the way to midseason last year of Sean Payton identifying somebody. And I think as a head coach, one of your skills or your key traits has to be identifying talent in coaches, not just players, and coaching the coaches. And he's prepared Davis Webb to take this step. So it says something about Davis Webb, and you saw guys like Chase Daniel have played for Sean Payton, that if he's making this move, it says something about Davis Webb and how he feels about Davis Webb. And then the other thing is just it's for the betterment of this football team. And it would be really easy to just say we're going to keep doing things the way we've been doing them. But I think that search for improvement is really admirable, and it may be what the Broncos need to take that next step. And Sean Payton had talked about during the year, hey, I've got to get the plays in a little bit quicker, that there are times where in the red zone, as a head coach, you're thinking about what's the downside of calling a reverse? Like, could you lose 8 yards? And maybe, he did say that the offensive coordinator is still going to have the same approach as the head coach, but maybe you're able to call plays a little bit more freely. Maybe there are elements where it speeds things up just a little bit, and that could help this Broncos offense as they move into 2026. But that was the big move, and I think the last number I saw, there's either 20 or 21 new offensive play callers, which is wild to think about. And for a team that just made it to the AFC Championship game, this is a big move. And I'm excited to see how it pans out. We've heard players say nothing but great things about Davis Webb. And in terms of the excitement of the season, this is one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm ready to see what this looks like. Got a few months to go, but this is definitely one of the biggest stories of the offseason.
No, I agree. And I know in your instant analysis, which if you haven't checked it out, make sure you guys head to that YouTube channel, check out the instant analysis from the NFL Combine. You also mentioned the excitement of Vance Joseph remaining here with the team and kind of the comments that upper management had made about it, and just the fact that they're happy to have them. And you mentioned your analysis, like the Broncos gain to have him here, to see the way he's developed these guys. We've seen that defense, and we've talked about it back at the end of the 2024 season of saying, like, how is the defense going to get better? And then in 2025, they did just that. And so having Vance Joseph there is also key.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that Sean Payton and George Payton both said they were surprised didn't get a head coaching job. There were 10 vacancies. Obviously, Vance Joseph interviewed for several. He's had head coaching experience in the past. But it was just interesting hearing Sean Payton talk about Vance Joseph and kind of what he sees from his defensive coordinator and his presence, the calming presence he has about him that allows him to connect to players. George Payton talked about him getting the best out of young players and developing them. You saw a guy like Nick Bonito, who he would tell you the first couple years of his career, kind of it wasn't easy, right, to get to where he is now, where he's a double-digit sack guy and a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. Vance Joseph helped get that out of him. And these guys talk all the time about how much VJ means to them. So it is surprising that he doesn't get that opportunity. And part of it, I'm sure, is just the league now is like people are trying to find that offensive guy. But we just saw Mike McDonald win a Super Bowl as the first defensive play caller to ever win a Super Bowl. And so certainly, as Sean Payton said, it can work with a bunch of different approaches. And obviously the success that Vance Joseph has had here, if it continues, you'd expect him to be in those conversations again. But for the 2026 season, it's significant for Denver that he's back, just in terms of being the play caller, having that consistency. And again, I know we just talked about Davis Webb taking over as the play caller offensively, but you still have Sean Payton there. And so it's, as he said, it's still going to be the same offense. They're still running the same thing as the Broncos offense. It's not one guy's offense. It's not one person's offense. But so you still have some degree of consistency there. And I think to keep that consistency defensively is also really important, because if you went into this season with a new defensive coordinator, there would have been questions, whether fair or not. And maybe the Broncos were able to live up to last year's ability, but
some learning curves as well.
Yeah, but there would have been questions just in terms of, okay, this team had one of the best defenses in the NFL. They forced 5 turnovers against Buffalo. They were top 3, I think, in scoring. And now you've got to kind of start from scratch, right, with a new defensive coordinator. Instead, you return all that familiarity, and it's not an easy defense to learn. And so a lot of these guys that are returning are already versed in that system. And that matters, and it helps you, I think. You never pick up where you left off, but I think it puts you in a better position where you're able to – and it also seemed like last year they kind of figured out the attacking mindset, right, and it shifted in 2024 too. And so this is a big deal for a team that is going to have Super Bowl aspirations again and is trying to get, as Sean Payton said, a game and a half further than they did this year. But I think there would have been at least some unknown defensively if Vance Joseph had left and you had to bring someone else in. And so for the Broncos, it's a home run that he's back and that he's able to remain the defensive coordinator. You hope at some point he gets another opportunity, but for this year, it's a good thing for this Broncos team that's on the cusp, it feels like, of doing something special.
Yeah, you definitely, like you mentioned, the guys talk nothing but great things about Vance Joseph and the way he's able to develop them. There's a lot of talk going into the offseason, a lot of must that this team must do to kind of continue on to their success, as you mentioned, and as head coach Sean Payton has mentioned. You have to go back to the beginning. You don't start where you left off every season. You have to go back and start fresh. And that starts with fixing some key parts in the offseason to get you there. So what are some musts that you heard from the rumblings of Combine?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously they're not going to outline their plan specifically, right? But when you look at the free agents, the pending free agents for the Broncos, you're looking at guys like Alex Singleton and Justin Sternat at inside linebacker. And so those are two guys that were essentially starters for you. Sternat obviously filled in with Dre Greenlaw out for part of the year. That's a must in terms of inside linebacker, because otherwise you don't have the starters, right? And so does that mean re-signing one of them, both of them? George Payton mentioned they'd love to have those guys back and that they are Denver Broncos. And George Payton said, like, if you're not re-signing those guys, like, who are you re-signing? And that's about as strong a language as I've heard George use. And he talks about guys being core players, but I liked hearing that. It's like, these are the guys we want around, and high character, resilient guys that are also good football players. Yeah. Now, he did acknowledge it doesn't necessarily mean that they're both going to be back or either will be back, because you don't know how free agency plays out, and there's an element of unknown. There's an element of things you cannot control when you have free agents, but that's one position. And even though that seems like a deep linebacker draft, George Payton said that's not necessarily related to how they'll approach that. Running back's another one. Obviously, J.K. Dobbins is an impending free agent. He talks about wanting to be back. I believe in an interview with KOA, George Payton mentioned that being an option as well, that he's a guy that they could see coming back. But again, whether it's J.K. Dobbins or somebody else, you've got to add to that room. And whether that's a veteran, a draft pick, whether it's both, you've got to add to that group. And it's worth noting there, he was pleased with George Payton with what he saw from R.J. Harvey. But just from a numbers standpoint and kind of where you want the run game to be, you've got to add someone there. Sean Payton mentioned tight end as well with some impending free agents. I think the key in general, though, is like as you look at these spots, it's also about the spots that they don't have issues or impending free agents. And there's been 10 extensions over the last 18 months. And whether that's Cortland Sutton, Nick Bonito,
Zach
Quinn
Allen.
Miners, Zach Allen, Pat Surtain, Garrett Bowles, Jonathan Cooper, and I'm sure Will Lutz. Apologies if I missed anybody, but those aren't just players. Those are good players, key players, foundational players that the Broncos have gotten contracts done with, and DJ Jones. And it's Malcolm Roach.
The list just keeps going.
And so it leaves you in a good spot in terms of, like, imagine if half those guys were free agents this year, you're in a much different spot. And so I think it's a credit to the roster, the job roster building that George Payton has done. Sean Payton gave him credit at the Combine for doing that. But that's a big part of this, is that they don't have to kind of worry the same way they would. And it doesn't mean, it wouldn't hurt to lose some of the impending free agent, Luke Wattenberg. I mean,
they just keep coming in,
and it's a big deal. So credit to the front office for getting those done. It puts you in a much better position in the offseason. And now you look to improve in other ways, because the last thing that we heard from them that stood out was Sean Payton was asked, hey, when you're this close, when you're on the cusp, do you make a swing for it, or do you kind of stick to the normal approach? He said, it's a great question, and there's a little bit of temptation to do both. And George Payton mentioned you've got to have that. I think in January it was mentioned as like opportunistically aggressive. You've got to be urgent, but you can't leave your process. You can't be out over your skis. You've got to still stay disciplined, or else you get yourself into trouble from a roster building perspective. And then in terms of the team itself, Sean Payton said, listen, I'm not naive enough to think that we're going to win 12 of 14 one-score games again, right? Like, they were 12-2, 12-3, right, in one-score games. that tends to regress towards the mean. And so, okay, how do you take 5 of those one-score games and make them not one-score games so that maybe you go 3-3 or 4-2 in one-score games, but can you take 5 of them and get it out of that bucket? And he mentioned the turnover margin. He mentioned running the ball more consistently. And those are things that they're easy things to focus in on. If this team had no quote-unquote issues and they lost in some, obviously it was a tough loss, but like there are no areas where you could look at it and say you need improvement. I think it's hard, or maybe harder as you go into the offseason to like get motivated to do it again.
Yeah.
And if you're this defense, you can say, hey, we played great. We didn't force enough turnovers. That's got to be our focus. If you're this offensive line or this running back group, hey, we had some good moments in good games, but we've got to be better running the football. If we're the offense, we gotta convert on red zone opportunities to put games out of reach so that they're not one-score games.
Yeah.
And that gives you like tangible things to grasp onto and focus on as you go into this season, and hopefully position you to make another run.
You mentioned it right there, that the foundational players that they were able to re-sign and get done. I think it shows a lot about the vision that George Paton has for this team, as well as Sean Payton. But I think it also shows the patience and the trust the players have in them as well. I think I remember training camp when Malcolm Roach saw other guys getting, he's like, look, I'm here to play football and I'm here to have fun, and that will work itself out when the time comes. And that's exactly what happened. And we had stated that kind of idea back when Jonathan Cooper was signed, saying like, the message is sent very clear. If you come in, buy into the program, do what you need to do, you will get rewarded. And they saw that play out over the course of the season with a variety of different guys. And there were no egos, there were no divas. Everyone was so excited for that next guy to get that contract. And I think that's the beautiful part of what this team is and how well they gel together, is that they all want each other to win because they know that that leads to wins on the football fields, because that continuity and that bond can't be taught. Like you'd have to have it, and it has to be in your building. It has to be special. And then, as you mentioned, all the things where they know that they can get better at, that list goes on, and that's when they can attack. They can attack those main focus points, and that's what OTAs and training camp, minicamp, all these things are for, because now they have new goals. And if you remember when we finished the 2024 season, we talked about the players getting a taste of the playoffs. Now you got a taste of potentially being one game away from playing in the Super Bowl. So I think that is a constant motivation for this team, especially when you see guys like Pat Surtain and what he was able to do with the new rookies coming in, and you have Nick Bonito coming in and being a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. And then you have these other guys who felt like, yeah, I could have done better. I will do better. And it's like, it's that added motivation for this team that's going to make next season very exciting.
Yeah. And it's months away until the season, but like things are rolling here, right? We're less than 2 weeks away from free agency. And then you've got, a couple weeks before the annual meetings where we hear from a lot of these executives with the Broncos. Then you're into draft prep. And then before you know it, guys are back in the building getting ready for that 2026 season. And certainly there'll be a lot of storylines when that happens. So excited to kind of see it play out. But it'll be a little different as we move forward.
Yes, it will be a little different because Broncos country. I do have to announce that this was my last season with the Denver Broncos. I know. I can hear the tears flowing in Broncos country. But as you guys know, I am born and raised a Broncos fan, so I will not be going anywhere. You might just see me in a different capacity. I'm going to be the one yelling at Aric now from the stands, being like, oh my God, it's Aric DiLalla. But it's been a dream come true being able to cover this team as a young girl that loved the Broncos and produced for Sunday Night Football here, and for them to welcome me in and for you guys to welcome me in, I will appreciate it forever. And I'm very excited to see what this team does. I'm very excited to just cheer and be able to be as loud and as obnoxious as I want again, because I had to hold it in. Now I can just be free. But I love you guys. Thank you so much again for welcoming and all the support. And I will see you guys at a game. Yeah, and we'll miss you. And it's been fun to do this podcast over the last couple of years with it's had 2 different names, very briefly, but it's had two different names. And listen, if we start off slow, we're gonna call and get you right back because 2 for 2. I will catch a flight ASAP. 2 for 2 making the playoffs with you here, and
There's been some great moments to talk about, some tough losses, some real highlights over the last couple of years. So it's been fun to get to do this podcast, and we know we'll hear you cheering us on.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well. Thanks for being the best podcast partner a person could have. And definitely when you said that, I instantly thought of the Giants game that was played on my birthday. DT's was put into the Ring of Fame, and that's a game I definitely will never forget. And the 2 seasons I spent here as your guys' team reporter and host, I will also never forget. So thank you guys again. Appreciate you as always. And I guess you're going to have to learn to do the tag out, so I'm going to just toss it to you now.
Wow. Yeah, that was unexpected. But yeah, you got to go. Oh, we appreciate you, Elisa. We will miss you here in Broncos country. And we'll be back with some podcasting. It might have the same name. It might have a different name. Maybe I'll try to sneak the old name in there one more time. But for now, thank you for listening to Altitude Advantage. For our team reporter, Elisa Hernandez, I'm Aric DiLalla. Thanks for listening.